All right. We'll get to this.
When someone tells me they're from Massachusetts, now I always ask what part. I wonder if you kept the pilgrim ashtray that's still propped up on your bar cart. Could make a grand off of the chain you bought me, but goddamn, it's not for sale. When someone asks me who's my favorite Batman, I'll think of you and say Christian Bale. As long as I live, I'll remember the names of your favorite people.
That, by the way, is an artist known as Jensen McCrae. Jensen McCrae is going to be a star. I'm going to say this right now. It's like I'm Don Kirshner or something. Jensen McCrae is going to be a star. But she is. She's really good. And I mean, I've been listening to her. She's got a new album coming out in a few weeks, but they're like, you know how they do it? They drop one single or one track at a time. So anyway, I'm very confident about what I'm saying. So I have a couple other things to say to you. Very exciting news. You might have heard it before the news. So the International Society of Tables came to our studio today, and they have certified our table as the world's greatest table. This table, you know, it took 5 years for this table even to exist. We had to dream this table into existence. There wasn't any table like this. There wasn't a table like this, and then now there's a table. I feel like there's a Stephen Sondheim song coming on here. But look, I made a table where there never was a table. Anyway, so that's very exciting. World's greatest table. I'm sitting at it. There's actually already a thing where somebody, would you call it a drink ring? What would you call this place where somebody didn't use a coaster? I'm going to call it a drink ring. A moisture ring? I don't know. Anyway, there is one on the world's greatest table. Imagine that. We got a lot of calls here already for Ask or Tell Me Anything. I just want to say one thing. Can I just mention one thing? Give me 2 seconds, then we'll get right to your calls. So, it was announced over the weekend by, I believe, President Trump, who we don't have to talk about. I mean, we got 6 calls on the board. I don't think any of them very few of them are about the current troubles in our country. But he announced over the weekend that, just as a thing, that several people associated with him would be going to Greenland, including J.D. Vance's wife, and I believe one of J.D. Vance's sons, yes. That the two of them plus somebody, Michael Waltz, national security advisor, they're going to go to Greenland. Nobody's really invited them to Greenland. There's no meeting scheduled in Greenland. They're just going. It's Usha Vance and Michael Waltz and one of them, I think it's Speedo Vance, his son Speedo. But they're just going to go to watch a dog sled race. The way we do. Once in a while you think, we go up to Saratoga and watch the ponies, or why don't we go to Greenland and watch the dog sled race? I bet those are good. Anyway, that's what they're doing. Just stopping by, just looking around. Nothing to worry about. All right, so it's Ask or Tell Me Anything. 888-720-9677 is one version of the number that you could call. Another version, 888-720-WNPR. I was going to say that's the number's alias, but then I wondered whether that would confuse the issue. All right, so here we go. We really have a lot of calls to get through already. I'm going to start out with Tim, who is calling us from Brantford. Hi, Tim. You have the floor.
Hi, Colin. It's so great to talk to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I drove my Chevy to the levee this morning.
Sweet. Even on a dreary day like today, you are still one of the few bright spots left in the world, and I really mean that.
Well, thank you. The levee was not dry. I can point that out.
And you're not, by the way, a self-described old chunk of coal, unless, as Bob Dylan would say, every one of your words rings true and glows like burning coal.
All right. Well, as we know, I flinch at compliments, so we have to praise redacted, as they say on the Frank Skinner show. Go ahead. So you want to talk about the song "The American Pie" and something else as well, right?
I do. So I think you will. I hope you will agree with me that the object of ranking works of art and judging them is kind of a fool's errand because everything is subjective.
Yes.
So just to me, the idea of like an award show around the performing arts doesn't really make a lot of sense to my brain.
Yeah. I mean, let me just say one person that I praise for this, when Dustin Hoffman won the Oscar for it was Kramer versus Kramer. So he wins the Best Actor Oscar, and he stood up there and he goes, "The idea that I am better than," and then he named all the other nominees in that category, and he said, "That's just insane," And I like it when somebody does that, when they say, "Look, we're really just talking about it's a lot of luck here, and just it's, as you say, it's an impossible thing to do logically." So anyway, continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yes. No, thank you so much. So, but having said that, I want to reverse course, and I'd like you to unwillingly suspend your disbelief about this process, and I'd like you to answer a question for me, okay? I'd like you to tell me if you agree with me that American Pie is the greatest song in the history of the world.
At the risk of jeopardizing our nascent relationship, I don't really know. I don't. First of all, it's too long. Second of all, I like the subject matter, but I think, Tim, and perhaps this will draw us back closer together, I think one of the things you have to do when you think about how music is perceived, one part of the perception, one slice of the pie of perception, the American pie of perception, is how much have you heard the song, and have you heard the song too many times? And I think certain songs like Somewhere Over the Rainbow or Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, whatever they started out as, now they're like, oh, that again? There should be a 5-year moratorium on certain songs just so they can regain some of their luster. And I think American Pie is borderline in that category. There's some great things about the song, and I'm sure you could name them even better, including like some interesting tempo changes and stuff like that. And the subject matter obviously is an important one. The death of Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper and Richie Valens at Clear Lake, Iowa. There's a lot of things to like about the song, but I feel like I've heard it too many times. I don't know. Is that a defense at all that you'll accept, I mean?
Well, I feel like what you just said would be said by a lot of people. Mm. And you're actually not talking to the right audience here, because it was number one on my Spotify playlist last year for the most times played. But what I would say in favor of it is that, especially for someone like you, and I don't want to give out any secrets here, but you were born in approximately 1955. That song tells the story of the evolution of American rock music throughout your adolescence and childhood. It's intimately connected to your experience.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree about that. And by the way, I have been to Clear Lake, Iowa, and I've been to, is it called the Ritz? The Ritz. I went to the ballroom where they performed. So I'm not unconnected to this. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, it's an ambitious piece of work. I feel a little bit bad for Don McLean, just in the sense that I think, he's only, maybe Vincent is the other one he's known for, but because it just kind of blats out the sun, because it's a really big song. It's got a lot going on in it. But if I didn't hear it for about 3 years, that would be okay. Except that I live with someone who is going to play it or is going to arrange for it to be on the radio sometime in the next 3 or 4 months. It could be that I feel hunted by that song because it's on in my house a lot. But if you like it so much that you played it a lot on Spotify.
Almost every day.
Yeah. Okay, no, now I'm getting a little worried.
Well, don't be worried. I just want to, first of all, it's a great pleasure to talk to you. I just want to say one more thing. Sure. I'm the same guy a couple of years ago who sent you my book about a man who grew up picking cotton in Mississippi under Jim Crow and went on to become one of the first black stuntmen in Hollywood, Willie Harris.
Oh, yeah.
So we had some emails we exchanged.
Well, I mean, the other thing that I would just generally say, and I'm not directing this at you, Tim, although I'm a little worried about that everyday thing. But you know what? Like every Monday, one of the things I do is I think a little bit about how we're going to handle the music, because I can use any kind of music I want to do. All the music you're going to hear today, starting with Jensen McCrae and moving forward, is by women artists who are young and who have released said music sometime in 2025. And I do worry a little bit that people born in 1955 and years around it get a little stuck at a certain time, and there's so much more music that's being made. And it's important to keep up on that stuff too. But I also praise you. It's good to have passions, and you have a passion. You have a passion for American Pie. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, we're going to go from there to somebody whom I believe I saw quite recently, and that would be Anthony in New Haven. Hi, Anthony. You're on the air.
Hey, Colin. It was so great meeting you at the Peabody. By the way, I did not expect you to remember me at all. So that was a real treat.
Plus, you got to meet Robin, who is also Robin Doyle-Dakin, who's also screening calls today, and who I regard as a more. I mean, I think the difference between meeting me and meeting Robin is that meeting Robin is actually pleasant.
I think Robin and I talked for like 20 minutes.
Yeah,
it was great.
See?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say also, I mean, just an embarrassment of riches of local NPR personalities that I spoke to. Chion Wolf, John Henry Smith, Frankie Graziano, Lily Tyson. I spoke to Kalila Brown Dean's husband at the appetizer table, Betsy Kaplan. The embarrassment of riches of NPR personalities was only exceeded by my wife's own embarrassment at my shameless self-promotion.
You're doing okay. You're fine.
As I told John Henry Smith, shamelessness is next to godliness. So,
there you go. You didn't talk to Betsy Kaplan, by the way, because Betsy Kaplan had a terrible cold and didn't come, and we were heartbroken. But anyway, we have to move on to your topic, because your topic is of great interest, not only to me, but to our technical producer today, the maestro Dylan Reyes, is on the road right now. So coming back, an era of greatness comes back to us today in the form of Kat Pastor, who was the technical producer for many years. And she has some very strong feelings about what it is that you're about to bring up, Anthony. So go ahead.
Sure. So I had a previous call about the zipper merge, which, for anybody that's not familiar, is the idea that you maximize both lanes that have to merge instead of everybody moving over and one lane being empty. This came up recently for me because I brought up the subject to a CrossFit coach of mine at called The Lab in New Haven. Shout out to them. And this CrossFit coach, who I said I would not name, they took a very strong stance against the zipper merge and called me selfish. So I felt the need to, reignite the debate because, that those thoughts of being selfish are starting to creep back into my mind.
I don't think you're being selfish. And not only that, so Kat Pastor, were she part of this conversation right now, would be 100% on your side. So let me just try to explain. And by the way, this is something that the Magliozzi brothers, back in the days of Car Talk, discussed many times. And I think I'm echoing their sentiments, or maybe they just argued with each other the way they always did. I can't remember. But anyway, so in the case of a zipper merge, so what's happening is, let's say the left lane doesn't either just ends somewhere up ahead of you, or there's construction and the left lane's closed down. Could be the right lane too, but let's say it's the left lane. So if you're in the left lane and you know this is going to happen, one option you have is to begin signaling and trying to get into the adjacent lane ASAP, and the people who do that, they have sort of, I think, I don't know anything about your CrossFit trainer, but some of them have a kind of Puritan guilt about the idea that they would stay in this kind of open lane longer than they needed to. They didn't take, anticipatory action. They didn't merge into the right-hand lane sooner. That would have been the virtuous thing to do. So now they're going to do that. They're signaling with their right blinker, but they're also signaling with their virtue. So that's your CrossFit trainer right there. Whereas Kat and I and you would all say, no, it's stupid to waste the space that exists in that left lane. What you ought to do is let that left lane fill up, and then at the point, the kind of last possible point of merging, that's where the merging should take place. And everybody understands it, and then you take turns, right, left, and you have an orderly thing, and you haven't vacated a lane that was usable way earlier than you needed to. Do you think, Anthony, that I've summed this up adequately?
No, you've captured it perfectly.
Yeah. So I just think the person, I'm going to just go out on a limb here. I think your CrossFit trainer person, I think that person is guilty about something else. I think they feel terrible about something else they've done in their life. And so they've projected it all onto the zipper merge. And the sooner they deal karmically with whatever it is that's really bothering them, the more sense their driving is going to make to them.
That is exactly what I'm going to tell them, and I am sure that will completely sway them over, and you will actually have a new follower.
Yeah, you could definitely attribute it to me. I see no reason for making them any more upset at you. But you're not a selfish person. You may be a selfish person. I don't know you well enough to really, give you complete, carte blanche on that. But you're not. This doesn't make you a selfish person. Your approach to the zipper lane, I think, is intelligent and sensible, and not at all selfish. Ego te absolvo. All right, so I like this show so much. All right, so we got a lot of other things going on here. I think we'll go to Carl, who I think I also met the other night at the Yale Museum of Yale Peabody Dinosaurs. Hi, Carl. Carl, you're up on the air. Ooh, he might have disappeared or dozed off, or I hope he wasn't driving and he dozed off. All right, so let's go to Vincent. We'll go to Vincent in Norwich. Hi, Vincent.
Hi. Just wanted to tell you about this. So I've always been overweight. I've tried to diet many times and failed, and I decided what I really needed was just some self-discipline, and that led me to Stoicism, specifically to Discipline is Destiny, which is a book by Ryan Holiday. And it's a great book. It's a great series of books. I highly recommend. They're full of examples from more contemporary history, sports, and the arts to support Stoic rules of the ancients. And one of the author's mentors is Robert Greene, who wrote The 48 Laws of Power. And that's the book I'm listening to now. I'm somewhat repulsed and surprised that this was the mentor to the guy who wrote these great books, because whereas those books on Stoicism inspired me to live up to my values, this book on power encourages me to use deceitful tactics to gain power. And if I did, I would truly become someone I didn't like. I mean, some of the things are like, court attention at all costs, get others to do the work but take the credit, pose as a friend but work as a spy. These little things. And, I haven't gotten halfway through the 48 laws. It's quite apparent that this is the playbook that Donald Trump has been using all along. And I just want to get your thoughts on that.
It's a book, so he probably came to it intuitively, but as opposed to having read a book. But yes, I think that the original Stoics, people like Seneca or like Epictetus, would not recognize themselves in that kind of advice because there has to be some kind of order and morality to it. I will just chime in and say, so one thing that I don't think I've made public on the radio, although I've written about it. I've become addicted. This is a little embarrassing, but I've become addicted to an old sci-fi series. I mean old, like maybe 15 years old, called Falling Skies. It stars Noah Wyle, and it's about Earth after aliens. These kind of semi-incompetent aliens that have taken over. But it goes on for seasons and seasons. And at one point, somebody gives his character, Tom Mason, a copy of Epictetus. So, I mean, Stoicism is cool. It's even in sci-fi, and including a show that, as far as I know, only I watch. But I think Stoicism is. We should do a show about Stoicism. That's a perfect Lily Tyson episode. So, and when we do, I want you to tell everybody that you thought of it, and it's your okay. Okay, so that's my little gift to you. All right, I'm thinking what we'll do is that we will take a break. We've got Lake Como, David, Gary, and John, and Carl, and so we will take a break, and we will talk to a certain number of those.
Pretty cautionary, hurt your
feelings involuntary. When I say I'll see you, I mean in February. So kiss me while you can, and baby, when you're ready, I'll be there with hands so steady. You wanna say goodbye, I'm not crying rivers if you.
That's Julia Michaels and Maren Morris with Scissors, a song which the Maestro Dylan Reyes refers to as, he's invented a category called TikTok wordplay. So it's actually number one on the TikTok wordplay charts on Billboard, so doing very well. All right. Interestingly, a lot of the calls for today's show are about music so far. The number, by the way, 888-720-9677, 888-720-WNPR. I think we need to go to Lake Como Dave here, and then we've also got Carl and John and Gary. All right, Lake Como Dave, you have the floor.
Thanks, Colin. I thought I'd throw a couple of topics up there, and you can just pick what you like. One is just, a Trump thing on, one of the ongoing topics. Another is sort of more related to a strategy that I've found helps a little to sort of decrease the stress a little bit. But I would do either of those with equal interest. Up to you.
So is the second one, is that your way of kind of, on a stealth basis, reintroducing model trains?
Well, it could be. It's a little more general than that.
Because I tried to radicalize your wife about this, and it turns out she's an enabler. She buys you model trains you haven't even asked for. Which, I mean, you start wondering, whose hobby is this really? Or maybe
that's true. Well,
she's trying to keep you busy or something.
When she met my parents for the first time at their house many years ago, we were down the basement looking through some old boxes, and I pulled out a box that had the model trains I hadn't looked at since high school, and she said, "Oh, what's this?" And then, in short order, we were off to the races. So she likes toys of all kinds.
So,
anyway.
Rather than pick one of those two, I mean, your question or comment or whatever, it actually touches upon something that came up over the weekend, where a guy who listens to this show DM'd me and said that, he was sort of troubled. He felt that we should every single day be engaging in resistance towards the Trump administration, that it's a full-blown constitutional crisis, which I don't necessarily question. Full-blown constitutional crisis, it's an autocratic takeover, and we should just be talking about it all the time and not talking about March Madness or model trains, or there was another one of the shows which was really bothering him. I can't remember what it was now. Oh, it was the movie times, this announced movie times, that we shouldn't be doing any frivolous topics. We should just every day be pounding away at this. And I do want to say that later this week, if everything goes as plans, none other than Timothy Snyder is going to be on our show. So there. But, and I thought about that, and I thought it's a little bit, I get what he's saying, and I think under certain circumstances I might be saying the same thing. But I think one of the lessons of the last few years is you kind of have to meet people where they are. And you sometimes they do want or need to hear stuff about, the fact that we have a constitutional crisis and verging towards an autocratic takeover. But you also have to sort of fill out the rest of life. You have to be aware of the fact that people are also living their lives there, and you have to talk about enough different things. At least I feel this show needs to talk about enough different things so that it doesn't become this monochromatic drumbeat of doom, which people tend to tune out at a certain point if you do it too much anyway. But it was an interesting question. I immediately knew my answer, which was that until circumstances change even more, I feel like we need to be pretty eclectic here, without ignoring the realities. But so in a way, the question that you're bringing up right now, I don't have an answer to what you should bring up, but the question itself is really interesting.
Well, I would only say that, and I know you need to move along, but it's for me, it's model trains, but it could equally be for somebody who repairs clocks and gets them to work. I like to take old trains that I find at an auction or train flea market, stuff like that, and actually work on every aspect of them, get them running well, get the body, whatever cosmetic work needs to be done on the exterior, lighting, everything, decals, painting decals, all that. And then the payoff, just like for the person who repairs clocks, is that, the clock is working. In this case, I get to see these trains then run on my layout, and I've got something that, nobody else really did that part of it. It
Yes.
might have been sold in the 50s or 60s. So the trick is it's very stress relieving, but don't have on like MSNBC.
No, that would obscure the point of it. Really,
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to
highly recommend it.
You got to be able to get away from this stuff sometimes too. You just can't have it throbbing through your veins all the time. So, so anyway, you don't have to defend your model train hobby to me. Your model trains are not they're not cluttering up my house. They're cluttering up your wife's house, and she apparently is fine with it. So, I mean, I think there's just nothing but happiness. Well, I do have to announce right now that the kind of ring that that is on the world's greatest table is this is by via Mr. McPants, is known as a water ring, according to Better Homes and Gardens. And who else would you even trust about something like that? Lake Como Dave, great talking to you. What do I do next? Well, Carl, we tried to get Carl on before, and it didn't work out, so let's try it again. Carl, you have the floor. Carl from Norwich. Hi, Carl.
Hey. Thank you, Colin. I swear I'm not going to talk about tapers.
Okay.
I promise. I want to talk about streaming services. The PBS NewsHour recently did a story. Musicians push back on dwindling payments from streaming services. And you probably have talked about this before. Pharrell Williams famously got a check from Pandora for about $1,200 for millions and millions and millions of streams, right?
Yeah, my favorite meme about this is the one that says, if the Trump administration gets rid of pennies, how is Spotify going to pay musicians? But anyway, continue.
Exactly. So there's really only about 5 major streaming services now that have a monopoly on all this stuff. Spotify's the number one, 103 million. Amazon Music, 51 million. iHeartRadio, 49. Pandora, 44. And Apple Music, 40.
I would like to say I'm still a Tidal subscriber. They're not even in the top 5, apparently. All right.
Right. So I am a musician, as you know.
Yep.
Maybe your listeners don't know, but yeah, carlfranklin.com. You can listen to all my stuff. I put it out there all free and I have it on Spotify and all the streaming services, and I have it for pay, if you want to buy it from iTunes, whatever. But I don't sell anything, of course, because it's free. So I have a kind of a solution to this, and it would require all 5 of these major players to implement the same feature, which is to give the artist, or in the case of a music company like Beyonce or whatever, the license holder, whatever, the ability to switch back and forth between free streaming and a low price purchase that for the music that the companies here, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Apple, Pandora, would have to bill in a very easy way to make it easy for somebody. In other words, I go to Spotify and I say, hey, I want to hear the Franklin Brothers Band. And at that point, I have turned on streaming and they say, okay, here's the Franklin Brothers Band. But if me, as the Franklin Brothers, can turn that into, let's say, 50 cents an album, something like that, like the price of music to purchase has to come way down. And these streaming services have to implement that. So, it would just say, I see you don't have that in your library for 50 cents. Boom. Or you could just turn that on. You say, you know what, Spotify, everything that I don't own that's pay for, that I'm paid for, just bill me, right?
So what if you left that? What if you left that switch on by mistake? Over the course of a couple of weeks. Anyway, yeah,
you have to be on it, right? But it's really up to the artist, especially the independent artists, to promote their stuff. And they do it on Spotify, but they really have to do promotions, like building a website in the 90s.
But is it sort of like how Prime or some other video streaming thing will say you can buy it for $5.99, you can rent it for $5.99, or you can buy it for $20 or something? Is that what we're saying, that you're usually renting it for nothing, but you could buy it for 50 cents?
Right, and I think that the switch has to be in the hands of the artist or label. Right. And I think you could turn it on and off. Like, Beyonce could make a deal with her label that says, I want to live stream it for 5 years. And then after that, everybody's got to buy it.
All right. I'm going to take this under advisement. It's an interesting idea. I still think that, well, never mind. I don't want to get too bogged down in this. And we got a lot of calls here. Let's go to Holly in Coventry. Hi, Holly.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
I'm just fine.
Great. I just wanted to comment. I recently returned from Italy. I was there for a couple of weeks, and I went to several locations. And I was approached by a lot of people who wanted to talk about Trump. And, they don't like him.
Yeah.
And they were happy when I said, yeah, he's not my president. I didn't vote for him. But, I was in a museum, and this Canadian woman just said, hey, are you from America? I'm like, yeah. She goes, I'm from Canada. I'm like, and I immediately said, I'm really sorry. I love Canada. I said, I didn't vote for him. It's just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, I would understand a Canadian person. When you're in Italy, Giorgia Meloni isn't all that different from Trump. So, but yeah, I feel your pain because, in fact, my partner and I are planning a trip to Montreal in May, and we love Montreal and have been there many times. And it's like, yeah, you wonder, should I just buy some elbows up, shirts and just have them and put them on and just see if I can disqualify or just avoid the whole conversation? Or do I have to say this to everybody that I buy coffee from? I didn't vote for him. It really is.
Yeah.
And I should also say that I think somebody suggested to us, and I think it's a really good idea. There are a lot of people here in this country who are from Canada and elected to come here and then become naturalized citizens. And now here they are with a government that spits on their homeland. And I think we may do a show about that, or maybe about the whole complex Canadian question. But I
should. I have a friend who's here who she wants to go back to Canada now. She is the CEO of a company, and she's like, I just don't like it.
No, I mean, why would anybody like it? And so it's, and I think it is going to be a problem for people who like to travel. I mean, I find in general, over the last 20 years, there's certain places where you kind of have to identify what kind of American you are.
You do.
I was in
Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, not Canada. I was in Mexico. Had the same questions from people.
Yeah, I was in the fairly small town of Drogheda, Ireland, years ago, and I went into a coffee place, and it was really, really crowded, and there was this young Irish couple there having a conversation about something, and I asked if they minded if I took the seat, and one of the guys said, "Well, tell me a little something about yourself. What are you doing here anyway?" And so I had to kind of explain, and then when I was all done, he patted the seat next to him, and he said, sit down, Yank." So yeah, sometimes it's just, and maybe it's good, Holly. Maybe it's good that we have these conversations. Maybe it's good for everybody that there's a clearing of the air. But great. But great call.
I'm getting sick of talking about him, and I want him gone.
I know. That was your vacation. You still had to talk about it. All right. Thanks for your call. That was great. We're going to go to Dennis in Bethany, Connecticut. Let me once again give out the phone number, 888-720-9677, 888-720-WNPR. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Colin. How are you doing today?
I am just fine. Thank you.
Oh, good to hear. I have a question, and I'm going to rely on see if I can get some words of wisdom from you, if that's okay.
Yep.
I have two friends who recently, within the last few weeks, have lost their dad, and that's leaving behind elderly moms, and they're now transitioning into caregiver roles. And I know that you had some experience as a caregiver, and I was wondering if you could give me some advice on what sort of supporting gestures I could make to help them along as they're dealing with these changes.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I feel a little presumptuous, although I did write a book about caring for my father at the end of his life. But I feel a little presumptuous, speaking to anybody else's situation, because they all are really, really different. They're unique unto themselves. And the one thing that I have told other people that I love and care about who've been in the situation where one of their parents or some other very important family member is dying, but dying over the span of weeks and months. I always tell people, don't leave anything on the field. Just do it all, do everything, so that you don't have any questions. You're not asking when it's all over. You'll say, I didn't skimp, I didn't take any shortcuts. That kind of peace of mind to the caregiver is worth quite a lot. And obviously, when you do that, you'll be doing a wonderful thing for the person who's dying too. But I always sort of feel like for both of my parents, that's kind of how I handle it. I'm an only child, And so there was nobody else who's going to do this. And I just thought, you know what? I'm not going to try to get out of anything. I'll just do it. And I think that's a really good thing. But you're asking a slightly different question, is how to be supportive at a time when now the other parent, the surviving parent, is on her own. And I think, one thing you can always do for people is offer to take on a duty. Like, I don't know, if they bring dinner over there 2 or 3 nights a week, you say, how about if I take Wednesday? You can always sort of just help people with the stuff that gets really exhausting. But I also just think, the biggest gift we tend to give each other if we do it is to listen. I think people don't need a lot of permission, but they might need a little permission to just start talking about what's up and how they're feeling and stuff like that. I don't know. Is that kind of what you're looking for? Or?
Yes, yeah, it is, and that's kind of what's been going on. I mean, it's both the dads were older, and the health was obviously where it was going, but and the moms are in their 80s, so I can just see that this could be a challenging and maybe somewhat emotionally exhausting period. So that's kind of what I was driving at.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest thing to do is figure out how to mediate something like that without shortchanging the person that you're trying to care for. Because the truth is, there's the cliche, what has become the cliche is you put on your own oxygen mask before you attempt to assist the person sitting next to you. That you kind of have to do the equivalent of that. You have to make sure you're taking good enough care of yourself. I mean, we're kind of struggling with this in a different way in my own family right now. Is people are getting exhausted trying to care for somebody who's very sick and has a lot of problems, and it gets to a point where you're thinking, wow, I could wipe myself out for weeks by taking it too far, that somehow or other you have to strike that balance where you keep something in your reserve tank, which I know flies in the face of the first thing that I said to you. But it depends, what is it? Is it a sprint? Is it a marathon? And I guess I would amend my first comments to say, don't shortchange them about anything important, and try to figure out what would help and volunteer. But also, when people are like that, listening to them is really important too. I remember that when my father was dying, he was in a wheelchair towards the end of his life, and I would take him places, and then I would take him to the Wadsworth Athenaeum or something, which was fine, but it turned out he really wanted to go to like a store, So it's important to find out what people actually want and what would make them feel a little bit more empowered. So it's the one thing I will say, and then I got to go to a break here. This is like the hardest stuff in the world, and they don't give you a roadmap. I mean, there just isn't one because every single one of these situations is unique. So, but yeah, listen to your friends and see how you can help them. All right, we'll take a little break. I mean, I'm the worst person to go for life wisdom, so I feel like a complete fraud. Anyway, we're going to take a little break, and then we will come back.
Strawberry dancer, in the summer, travel over, ice cream truck, tomorrow's never so faster, faster than I ever could. I've been switching, so figure steps in, cause I cannot run anymore. I need the answer, cause in the flavors, you can't burn it all. Strawberry dancer, in the summer, travel over.
Get out of my head, I want my mind back. Retracing my steps, I can't get that time back. I don't think love should feel like this. You take what you want and then leave the rest. Is this what you wanted? Wanted to show me just how hard, just how lonely. Is this what you came
Okay, if you're hearing that song for the first time, so am I. This is what's called the Maestro's Surprise. Dylan Reyes picks out the song, the song that it heads into this segment on Mondays. However, Dylan Reyes is not our technical producer today. As I said, greatness returns. Kat Pastor is our technical producer today. Very exciting. Robin Doyle-Dakin's on the phones. Jonathan McPants is producing today, and actually now on the phones, brush with future greatness and maybe even current greatness, our wonderful intern, Angelica Gajewski, who is working on an episode right now we're very excited about. And my guess is, the Colin McEnroe Show Intern Hall of Fame, which a lot of people like to, during the summer months in particular, they like to go and walk through our gardens and enjoy the reflecting pool. And I feel like Angelica is going to have, a plaque up there in the Colin McEnroe Show Interns Hall of Fame. The greatness just oozing out of her right now. So anyway, she's doing the calls and stuff like that right now. And we are going to take one of those calls right now. So, okay, here's Chris. He does have some questions. First of all, we don't call it a desk. We call it a table. Damn it.
Actually, after listening to your last bit of introduction there, I have a question that I would like to lead with. Is Jonathan McPants actually his full legal name? Is McPants a real name?
His full name is Jonathan Wordsworth Flugelhorn McPants. So, yeah, that's his official. No, his real name is Jonathan McNichol. And then people say, well, why do you call him Pants? And it just takes forever. And it's one of those things where when you find out the explanation for something, you know how sometimes you're sorry you found out the explanation because it just wasn't as good as you hoped it would be? That's one of these things. This is that.
All right. We'll leave the pants on then. So back in September, I was at the Makerspace in Hartford where they have a full wood shop, welding shop, all kinds of shops that you can pay a monthly fee for. And I was there for a day making cuts for these shelves I was making, and somebody was there milling down a bunch of walnuts to make a desk, and he was telling me about the desk, and then the timing lined up where I think shortly thereafter you announced you had this desk or table that was made out of walnut. And I was just wondering if it happens to have been made at the TT Makerspace in Hartford there.
All I can say is the sourcing of this particular table, the world's greatest table, is a matter of utmost secrecy here at CT Public. Really, the only person who knows the full story is our CEO, Mark Contreras. He knows every single thing that happened leading up to the creation of this table. But for me to talk out of turn about this, it's not simply that I would lose my job, Chris. I might lose my life. But I think you're warm. I think you're warm. But in fact, I also have no idea. All right, we got to get through some calls here pretty quickly. Some people waiting for quite a while. Okay, let's start with, I don't know anything about this, but that could be good. Here's John in, I want Cromwell, John. There, that John. Hi, John. You're on the air.
Hi. Yes, my call has to do with contemplating the meaning of life. This is the anniversary of the longest non-lethal free fall without a parachute. In World War II, this gentleman, Nicholas Alcamade, was a tail gunner on a bomber, and their plane got hit, caught on fire. His parachute burned up, and rather than die in the fire, he figured he'd leap to his death. And he jumped out of the plane at 18,000 feet. And he fell all the way to the ground, and he managed to hit these trees that broke his fall, and he landed in a big pile of snow. And the only damage was he sprained his leg. Now it takes about a minute and a half to fall 18,000 feet, and I'm wondering if that's enough to truly contemplate the meaning of life.
Well, yeah, you want it to be sort of that kind of life review thing where you're really sort of thinking about what it all meant. Mainly, I think he was probably going, I don't think he was really going, in third grade where I kissed that girl, I probably shouldn't have done that. But the other thing I feel about him is, you're at a dinner party and you think you got a pretty good story to tell, something like that. And so you get all the way done telling your story. And then he would probably go, that's nothing. Listen to what happened to me, And after a while, he stopped being invited places. And then he just thought, maybe I should just dial back the whole falling story. But that's a great call, John. Thank you so much for that call. I'm going to go to another John. We're a little John-centric for a moment. John in Torrington. Hi, John.
Hey, how's it going, Colin? This is the Listen More John. So.
Okay. Listen More John. Yes. The famous Listen More John. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. I was just, wanted to talk about, how unfortunate it is that they closed South Whitney Pizza down, for a venue. I've got the bookstore here, and I'm also a music venue.
Yeah.
But the Democratic Party only has one problem, and that is losing the culture war via music. And, it's just really unfortunate that they shut down. We're getting fewer and fewer venues, and so we can't congregate, listen to music, and, yes, talk politics, and that's what it comes down to.
That's a really interesting point, I have to say. I mean, you think about supposedly, there is a theory, which I think is even more widely embraced now, that one of the triggers of the Enlightenment was the development of coffee houses, that coffee was a relatively new substance, but then suddenly you had people congregating in a place that wasn't a tavern, so if they had conversations, they were more likely to remember the ones at the coffee house as opposed to the tavern ones where they blacked out shortly afterwards. So you had something that kind of fires people's neurons up a little bit and gets them kind of sizzling and talking, and people from different walks of life and different ideological persuasions are gathering there, exchanging ideas, and there's a foment and a ferment, and I can never remember which is which, but and so that's kind of like what you're saying about music. You get together with some people, you listen to somebody sing American Pie, it takes 16 minutes, but then afterwards you have a conversation, and maybe that conversation isn't happening anymore. Yeah.
What you dance to is how you're going to vote, and I banned classic rock, and because we have to move forward. And my guys, if I go down to West Texas where I'm from, I'll go into some little place of 40, a town of 40. And they're playing just released country music.
Yeah, I support
country you. Country music is rock now, and Beyonce's doing the worst possible thing she could do. She's leading us to slaughter because if you listen to country, 95% chance you're going to vote country. Well, my guys here, Jaded in Paradise, Braintree, they can't get on the radio, and they're hoping to get that 1/16th of a penny.
Yeah,
this is ridiculous. But the most radical act, I'll leave you with this. The most radical act, all you listeners, go to a show.
Yeah.
There is your radical political act.
I agree.
Go to a show
Live
and
music.
Listen to original music, not classic rock covers, not tribute bands. Braintree, Jaded in Paradise, these bands, they're fantastic.
All right. I support you 100%. Except the part about Beyonce leading us to slaughter. I don't think I want to be associated with that remark. I mean, just as a general point. All right, so we're sort of done. On the other hand, he mentioned classic rock, so here's Gary. Gary, I can give you about 30 seconds, and I'm going to be ruthless.
Okay, hi, Colin.
Hi.
I just wanted to double-check that if you checked out the 79 Madison Square Garden performance by Tull of Thick as a Brick.
I'm going to be honest and say I haven't. And the reason I haven't is that sometimes, Gary, I have this repeated dream that I'm falling from a plane 18,000 feet. And I'm thinking, I used up some of my time watching another live performance of Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. That was not a good use of my life. All right, but we have to say goodbye for now. Sorry to Mary Jo, we didn't get to you, but thanks to everybody else who called. And yes, we will continue to do shows until someone stops us.